Hello, my name is Niall McKay and welcome to Living with PSC, a podcast about the rare disease of primary sclerosing cholangitis. Now, PSC causes the bile ducts inside and outside the liver to become scarred, narrowed and eventually blocked, and leads to liver cirrhosis. In this podcast, we aim to dispel some of the myths about the disease.
In this podcast, we discuss the value of patient registries, the difficulties we have with outdated research and geographical limitations, and symptoms like itching, fatigue, and pain. PSC Partners is addressing all of these areas with their patient registry, their worldwide integration of natural history database project, also known as WIND, and their Patient Reported Outcome Measures, or PROMS project, both of which aim to expedite PSC research and facilitate clinical trials. To join this patient-led community and to get involved in their efforts to research treatments and a cure, please visit www.pscpartners.org.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Laura Cristoferi, who's joining us today from Italy. Dr. Cristoferi, would you like to tell us your origin story, if you like, how you landed in the wonderful world of PSC and what clinic you're working at?
Good morning to everybody. I am Laura Cristoferi, as Niall said, and I'm an Italian hepatologist, and I am also a PhD candidate. And I'm working both at Milano Bicocca University as a researcher and as a clinical hepatologist at the Hospital of San Gerardo in Monza, that is a city very close to Milan. And the San Gerardo Hospital is a referral center for autoimmune liver disease in Italy. And our center is the leader of the center is the Professor Pietro Invernitti, that is a key opinion leader in all the immune-mediated liver disease, but mainly in primary biliary cholangitis. And together in my group, there is also Professor Marco Carbone, that is working in the field too, and Dr. Alessio Gerussi, that is working in the same topic. We are a group that is focused on the research and clinics on this kind of disease. And at the beginning of my PhD, considering that I am a gastroenterologist and I'm both interested in liver mainly, but also in the bowel diseases, I start being interested in primary sclerosing cholangitis, mainly because there are a lot of unanswered questions, and this connection between the gut and the liver was very fascinating to me. And so I decided to focus my PhD on PSC, and mainly on the discovery of biomarkers, prognostic biomarkers, and biomarkers able to allow us to determine the response to therapy.
Particularly the biomarkers. To date, what most people do is just go by blood tests and by liver function tests, and principally by alkaline phosphatase and by gamma GTs and some other issues. But we'll get to that a little bit later. In terms of Italy and PSC, that the disease is a rare disease, clearly, but it is more common in the Northern Hemisphere. And this is something that you've discovered is not necessarily true.
Yeah, this is a strong statement. But yeah, the problem is that the only study about epidemiology of PSC in Italy has been performed by our group together with the Ministry of Health, and is based on administrative data. And because in Italy we have this national rare disease registry, and PSC has his own code, administrative code, but as you can clearly imagine, the diagnosis of PSC, it's quite hard to do, and this administrative code could underestimate the incidence. And so, and of course, the administrative code don't allow to get into the clinical data and to check the quality of the epidemiological data using also clinical information and demographic information. And so there is a gap of knowledge considering this kind of data extraction that we hope to fill because we are building a national PSC registry in Italy, and the coordinator center will be our center. We have already started built the PBC national registry with very good results because the main characteristic of these registries are that we are trying to build a network not only with the tertiary centers and expert centers, but also with the secondary and primary centers in order to improve knowledge for the diagnosis and the management of this disease, and in order to give a close relationship between the referral center and the center more closer to the patient habitation, in order to have a more rapid connection in case of need of clinical trials and in case of need of clinical suggestion for the management, or in case of complicated endoscopic treatment required. And so we think that using this registry that will cover all the Italian country, I think that we will have some more precise epidemiological data, because as a referral center, we see a lot of PSC patients. And so we think that maybe the published incidence of 0.1 per 100,000 inhabitants is maybe a bit underestimated respect to the in real world.
Yeah, because it's a difficult disease to diagnose, almost impossible without a biopsy until quite recently, and now a little bit easier, I suppose, because of imaging. That people are doing more MRIs than they would have traditionally done, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But so it's your suspicion, I suppose, which you're waiting for the data, but it's your suspicion that that the incidences are a lot higher, if not probably, or if not equal to the incidences in, say, the northern hemisphere. And we're talking, there's definitely more PSC probably the further north you get, but you're saying there's a big gap in the data. Is that correct?
Yeah, of course, the gap in the data doesn't allow to assess really the incidence and prevalence of the disease in our country. In Spain, the data, that is another Mediterranean country, the data are very old because they are from 1980 and 1990,
which again,
40 years ago. And so I think that we need to refresh this data, because of course there are more studies from the Netherlands and Sweden and Norway, which are countries that can count on very good national registry that are built in the past years. And so I think that our registry will give us more data to compare with the other ones and to assess the gap between the Northern Europe countries and ours.
Biomarkers for the progression of the disease. It's sort of, I've heard it described by hepatologists as the sort of black box disease in a way. Once you're diagnosed, it's very difficult to tell where somebody is on the road of the illness. Usually they might need a transplant at some stage, but when that transplant will be needed. And one of the things that you've been studying is trying to figure out biomarkers by using imaging and then artificial intelligence to try and assess the difference or progression of the illness. Is that correct?
Yeah, of course. As you said, it's a bit frustrating for the clinician, because the patient during the outpatient visit usually ask you, okay, and what can you tell me about my prognosis? And of course, there are available biomarkers. So we know that some biochemical biomarkers are correlated with the prognosis of the patients, and so we can give some information. But in our clinical practice, we experience that sometimes these biomarkers are not so reliable. We cannot stage our patient using only these kind of biomarkers. And intuitively, when we look at at the imaging, at some resonance resonance imaging, magnetic resonance imaging, and we look at the longitudinal data, and we see with our eyes the progression of the disease, it is frustrating because we cannot assess the progression in a quantitative way. And so my main research topic is to find a way to assess the progression, and to use a non-invasive biomarker such as the MRI imaging, as a tool to help the clinician in risk stratify the patient, and to help the clinician in evaluating the response to therapy that you are giving to your patient, even if just off-label or experimental.
Yeah, because one of the problems, I think, is that when that often the biomarkers, whether you're looking at alkaline phosphatase or whatever,
Yeah.
that often by the time those biomarkers are obvious that there's something clearly wrong, it's often almost too late. That the damage is being done in a way, isn't it?
Yeah.
You get that information very late on, in terms of, because the progression of the illness can be very, very quick for people who might have been stable for a number of months or a number of years, and then suddenly their numbers kind of fall off a cliff almost, and then they're in crisis. Which it would be wonderful to be able to diagnose PSC patients and tell them, because I think with the MELD score in the United States, and we use it in Europe too, it is really designed for diseases that have a slow progression, so they can tell when somebody with other liver diseases is going to hit a crisis, whereas with PSC that's very difficult.
Yeah, the MELD score have been developed on different disease, and so it cannot be specific on the PSC. And as you said it before correctly, we see in our clinical practice that there are patients that over time don't change the level of, for example, kalium phosphatase, and you can clearly see in the magnetic resonance that the biliary tree is getting worse. And so the main aim of my research is trying to quantify the biliary damage and the liver damage in MRIs, and to use it to evaluate the disease, the progression of the disease over time. Of course, with the help of other biomarkers. The biomarkers already discovered have a lot of limitations, but they can be used together with the other non-invasive biomarker in a multivariable model to improve the prognostic assessment. But of course,
And is it, in a way, the problem is that the liver is almost too clever, isn't it? It sort of, it finds ways of repairing itself or working at times where it really shouldn't be working in some ways, you know. Um,
yeah.
but one of the things that I thought was very interesting about your paper was that you're actually comparing the spleen size and the ratio of the spleen size in relation to the liver, in relation to the MRI imaging, to help you try and assess a sort of a new biomarker, if you like.
Yeah, there are evidence in the literature that the spleen length and the spleen volume is an independent prognostic factor for PSC patients. And so that's why we decided, because in the paper you mentioned, we studied the quantitative biliary feature that have been derived using a software developed by a company from UK that is called Perspectum from Oxford. And they, using this software, they quantify the biliary tree, and they produce metrics which quantify the number of dilation, the number of stricture, the volume of biliary tree, and also they derived also composite metrics in which you can assess the severity of stricture overall, the severity of dilations, and other helpful metrics. And so we decided to assess we wanted to assess the prognostic role of this feature in our cohort. Of course, it's a retrospective cohort, it's a proof of concept study. And after having assessed that these metrics are very helpful in predicting prognosis in our cohort, we tried to put the already published evidence about other quantitative biomarkers, such as spleen length, in literature together with these metrics. And we developed a model that we adjust for the height, because the spleen size can change with the height of the patient, the age at MRI acquisition, and also the time from diagnosis to MRI, because in our study the MRIs were not precisely for all the patient performed at diagnosis.
Oh, and just let me reiterate that, if I may. So you're taking the data that they're studying, which is the spleen size and spleen length, and then the biliary tree, but you're also adding your own individual metrics, if you like, that are tailored for the particular patient, taking height, age, and length of diagnosis into consideration.
Yeah,
That's very
we
clever.
adjust the model for that. The last three factors you mentioned that are most anthropomorphic and clinical variable of the patient are not independently associated with prognosis, but they allowed us to improve the prognostic ability to discriminate high risk and low risk patient of our model, because they adjust the metrics, the number of strictures and the spleen length, and they improve the prognostic ability of the model. And so we include them in the model as well.
And if wave your magic wand, and if your dream were to come through, you would maybe be able to give clearer estimates on when patients should be transplanted.
Yeah, of course, we cannot. This is just a first step, but a lot of groups are working on this on this field and on this topic in PSC. And so, what we expect to have in the future is to have a more complex model in which all the biomarker, the MRI biomarker, the MRI-based biomarker, the liver stiffness, the biochemical biomarker, clinical informations, and characteristic of the patients can be put all together in a model that will be would be hopefully more precise in predicting liver transplantation and adverse outcome for our patients. That's the ambitious aim of this little part of disease prognostication in PSC.
And are there similar studies, maybe studying microbiome in the same way? That would there be a way to put the two pieces of information together, or is that is
Yeah,
that
of course. Yeah, as you of course may know, the most promising, together with the other trial that is going and that are continuously offered by the companies. There is the antibiotics, the vancomycin in particular, which is a non-absorbable antibiotics that widely used worldwide as an off-label therapy in PSC. And so this antibiotics is a role on the modulation of the microbiota, and so through the bile acid metabolism, and there is growing evidence about the role of microbiota in the development of biliary inflammation and altered biliary metabolism. And so, of course, I think that in order to assess antibiotics is helpful, and it has an efficacy on these patients. I think that we will try, because we will have this trial, that we will be the host center of this trial in Europe, I hope in the beginning of the next year. And so I hope that we will test the radiological based biomarker in the trial, and also the microbiota changes in patients who will take vancomycin versus placebo, in order to assess if they are good biomarkers to evaluate disease response to the experimental therapy.
Now, of course, vancomycin is somewhat controversial,
Yeah.
mostly because it hasn't been studied extensively. There is now a large study on at the Mayo Clinic, but in Italy you are studying it too.
We know, of course, that the Mayo Clinic is doing the trial, the Vanco trial, and they started to enroll a few months ago. But we decided to design a trial also in Italy, in order to assess in two different studies the role of vancomycin in PSC patients. And I think that Italy could be the right place to do this trial, because it is difficult to enroll PSC patients in a trial when you test vancomycin versus placebo, if there is no difficulties in finding vancomycin as an off-label therapy. So in Italy, it's not so usual to give vancomycin in the real life world as an off-label therapy. So we usually don't do that, and we prefer to wait for the trial, because we want to definitely assess if it's a good therapeutic alternative. And so I hope that we will have
And this is stemming from the fact that vancomycin is sort of used as a antibiotic of last resort, of course. And if I may, just from a patient perspective as well, like the markers that we deal with are itching, fatigue, and pain. And I think particularly in the case of pain, it is not. It is often misunderstood by physicians, because, of course, the liver doesn't have any nerve endings, so how can you feel pain in your liver? And yet somehow we do. so,
yeah.
so if I may just raise a flag on these markers that might be useful, and I know how difficult it would be to even try and quantify them or assess them. It's a very difficult situation.
I think that, as you said, liver as nerves just in the capsule. But I mean, PSC is different, because it is not the same for the biliary tree and the extrahepatic portion of biliary tree. And so I think that a clinician should trust a patient that is feeling pain in the upper right quadrant. And so, I, of course, completely understand your position. During trial, we will evaluate also that. And we will evaluate also the quality of life of patients, and also the age and all the the symptoms of the patient that could impair the quality of life. And we hope that there will be some improvements after treatment, where we feel very, the vancomycin is a very promising therapy, and I hope that we won't be, it won't be a delusion for us, and for you, of course, mainly.
Well, we hope that too. Well, Dr. Cristoferi, is there anything else that you'd like to add that I have neglected to ask you?
I would like to thank all the Patients Association. Thank you to you too.
Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this week. For more information about PSC and for a list of people and topics we'll be covering in the near future, please go to www.pscpartners.org. That's www.pscpartners.org. PSC Partners is a non-profit organisation dedicated to providing education and support to primary sclerosing cholangitis patients. There is information and resources on the website. There is a conference once a year. There is a private Facebook group that you can also join. Also, please join our patient registry. This is an anonymous database that provides research support to the medical community who are researching this disease. Thank you very much for listening.